Hello, hello. Welcome to this episode of Financial Tide. We talk a lot about this subject, but I think it's really important. So today, with my co-host Amanda Endersby today, we're going to be talking about budgeting and why it's important, who should do it, and why you should do it. So, Amanda, let's start off with who should budget.
Yeah. So I think everyone should budget. There's a lot of people, especially our age, that think, oh, I'm going to wait until I'm full blown in my career or have a mortgage or I'm saving for something big like a wedding or retirement or college funds or whatever it is. But it really doesn't matter whether you're in college or you're getting out of college, you have your first job, paying rent, you are married or have kids. Really, everyone should be budgeting. And I think that's a huge misconception people miss.
Yeah, and I think the easiest way to spend too much money is to have no clue where it's going. You're just spending willy-nilly. You think it's 25 bucks, 30 bucks here or there, but it's adding up. And a lot of the items that it gets spent on, if you look back at it, you might be like, well, that was probably an unnecessary item.
Yeah, definitely. So Taylor, why should you budget, right? We see that everyone should budget, but why?
Yeah, if you don't know where your money's going, you're more likely to spend it on things that you didn't anticipate and spend more. And being really intentional, I think, with where your money is going, including savings, is a really big part of setting yourself up financially and kind of preparing yourself for the future.
Yeah, I completely agree. I know that I'm super guilty of looking at my bank account one month and noticing my balance might be a little bit higher. So then I might be like, oh, I can afford to get my hair done this month or whatever. And then you realize, it's a parent's birthday, so you have to buy a present, or I need extra gas that month, or even, not noticing that I'm supposed to pay for pest control that quarter. And then I end up having to put that on a credit card and then, I'm saving even less because now I'm paying off a credit card, paying the interest, and all that could have been avoided if I had just budgeted like I'm supposed to be.
Yeah. And every year we're saying everyone should make a budget, but when do you start? I know that we talked about the different phases of life, but when do you make a budget?
Yeah, you should definitely make your budget now. Like I said, everyone should, right? But when we wait until whenever you think it's right to make your budget, if you think, oh, I'm going to wait for the height of my career, I'm going to wait till I want to save for retirement or put my kids through college, it's probably already too late. The better or the earlier you start, the better, right? If you can plan for 401k dedicated dollars or start planning for money that's dedicated towards investments or dedicated toward whatever XYZ, then the better. The earlier you start budgeting, the more you're able to adjust your budget, see where you can be flexible or where you need to kind of tighten up.
Yeah, and I think the big thing is that as much as there's different areas of finance out there and different phases of life and different parts, I think the issues that revolve around budgeting are pretty much the same. You have some sort of income or cash flow stream. If you're in college, maybe your parents are putting money in your account, or maybe you have a prepaid meal plan. All those things you need to budget with. If you're later in life, you have your first job, you're paying rent, you have a budget. So I think that really the when really is whenever you can, the sooner the better, like you said. But I think a lot of people don't realize that budgeting is a part of your life now, in the future, and it should have been in the past, but it's better now than never. So
Right. So we've made it clear that we need a budget, right? Everyone should right now start a budget. We need it. But how do you even create a budget? How do you start that or go about that?
yeah, and I think the simplest way that when people haven't budgeted in the past and we don't want to overwhelm them with spreadsheets and putting all of that out there and saying you need to spend strictly on this, I think the first budget that we really set up with people is what we refer to as the poor man's budget, which is just finding a period of time, checking your bank account at the beginning of that period of time, whether it's 6 months or a year. We usually do 6 months because it gives kind of a good picture. It's big enough that it's spread out and you can kind of average out the quarterly or semi-annual costs with some of those other costs, and then you average it out over that period of time, and you know exactly how much money is coming in and going out over that 6 month period of time. So you look at your bank account and you say, hey, I had $10,000. Now I have $16,000. You know, you saved about $1,000 a month over that period of time, which gives you kind of a good idea of, based on your income, how much spending you actually made. So that's the simple one, really quick and easy, not really intensive. We always like to start there so we don't overwhelm. And then the next one is really just going a bit more in depth of, hey, let's list out your expenses. Let's see what is a reoccurring cost. And I think this one's a little more intensive because you forget a lot of things when you sit down, you make a budget in one sitting, and you need to come back to it. You need to keep writing your expenses. You go, like you said, Amanda, I went and got my hair cut this month. I didn't think of that because I don't get my hair cut every single month. Sometimes it's 6 weeks, 8 weeks, depending on the person. So you don't think of it when you make your initial budget, but it's something that you have to account for moving forward. So it's important to come back to it and keep adding to that list and make it more of a dynamic budget as you remember those things. And it takes a couple months to get it up and running because unless you sit there and comb through your credit card on for a 6 month period and make sure you get every single expense, it's going to be a little bit different. So it's important to make sure you understand that it's dynamic and can be adjusted along the way based on what items come up in your life.
Yeah, that's super helpful. I know when I found out about the poor man's budget, I was shocked to see how much I was actually spending each month because, I started with the Excel budget and then I was like, oh, I'm spending way more than I wrote down for, the little things I wasn't adjusting for. One other thing that I want to add to that though is a lot of people make the mistake of not putting their savings into their budget. They just kind of think, oh, whatever's left over at the end of the month and I get paid again, I'll move that over into savings. But according to NerdWallet, about 84% of those that have a budget do exceed that budget. So if you're not baking in your savings, you are likely to be part of that 84% going over. You're not adding to your savings, and what is your budget really doing for you at that point? So yeah, we definitely think it's important to prioritize baking in your savings so that it's not taking the back burner and just kind of, oh, I wasn't able to save anything this month because I went over budget.
Yeah, I think you brought up a good point in there that I think we should touch on a little bit more, which is you have a budget, you made a budget, you need to put savings in the budget, but then how do you stick to it? Where's the accountability in that? And like, what are ways to keep yourself accountable to your budget so you don't end up in a situation where you are not actually following your budget?
Oh, wait, sorry, that cut out a lot. And I don't
Okay.
think that'll catch that on here.
Oh,
So maybe just start over from there.
yeah. So I think you brought up a really good point there, Amanda, that I think we should touch on a little bit more, which is really the accountability part of the budget and sticking to it. So what are some good ways that you can hold yourself accountable to the budget so you don't end up in that situation where you're racking up credit card debt and not saving for your future, just simply because you didn't stick to that budget?
Yeah, I definitely think you need to remember your why, right? What is your why? Why are you creating this budget? What are you trying to save for? What are your goals and what are you working towards? Because if you don't have a why, it's a lot easier to kind of throw your budget to the wind and be like, whatever, I'm just going to buy this. I deserve that type of thing. So really remembering your why. And then also creating automatic withdrawals is really important. Just that extra step of having to go to your savings to transfer it back to your checkings account. Like it'll make you rethink, do I really need to buy this? Do I really need to kind of dip into my savings for this? Is it something that can wait? Anything like that. And then lastly, kind of just don't get caught up in the day to day. I think sometimes I know I do at least, is I'm like, oh, I deserve this. I'm gonna run errands. Sure, I deserve to get a coffee or I want a new sweater, anything like that. So just not getting caught up in kind of these moments of like, I deserve these, kind of what you mentioned at the beginning of this podcast was, the $20 here, $30 here, because that can really damage your income and your budget.
Yeah, and I think that's part of the equation is that you do want to sweat the small stuff. you want to make sure that you're accounting for that in your budget and saying, hey, if I'm spending $10 on a smoothie, $5 on coffee, or adding out, or those are the kind of things that you don't necessarily account for perfectly on your budget because they're kind of variable items. But as you continue going through the month, if you don't check back in on your budget, you don't ever really realize that, hey, I spent a bunch of stuff on small stuff and it became a big budget item for me. So I think that, and slowing down the impulse buys, so just having the urge to buy something, if you can try to wait a month and see if you really need it and really want it, it will really help your budget. And as far as the impulse buy items that are variable, and I think really baking in kind of the small stuff and baking in kind of the impulse buy into your budget in the first place and say, hey, you do deserve stuff. You don't want to have a miserable life. You don't want to just be sitting at home pinching every penny that you can put into the bank. So we want you to go out there and spend some of your money, but we want you to do it in a controlled and conscious way. That if you say, hey, I am going to put aside $50 this month for coffees. They're about $5 a piece. I could only get 10 coffees this month, which still kind of a lot to go out. But if that's in your budget and that's something that makes you happy and you're putting your savings aside as well, then great. But then holding yourself accountable to, okay, that was my 10th coffee. Like, I know I want another one. I know I'm out shopping, but don't do it. Hold yourself accountable to that. So we touched on the other object here as well, Amanda, which is it okay to alter your budget? And what should you be altering in your budget when you are updating it?
Yes, it is definitely okay to alter your budget. You should be altering it early and often. Like you said, you kind of make your budget at the beginning and things come to mind, right? Your rent, your insurance, the things that you are constantly paying for every single month, utilities, anything like that. But then you do need to go back in. What about the date nights or your girls' nights or nails or haircuts or work clothes, anything like that? So it's easy to forget that. And then you think that you have more money than you actually do because you're forgetting all these little small things that maybe aren't every month, but they are sort of often. So that's why it's really important to alter.
Yeah, and I think if you're not altering it, your budget's going to be off. And I think that some of these variable items that come up, they're going to be constantly changing. And I think that's the big saying, is that the only thing constant is change, and your budget should follow that. And I think along the lines of those changes, there's some really big life changes that happen along the way throughout your career. You can have goal changes, you can have a family, inflation is making things more expensive always. So I think it's always really important to, after big life changes or feeling the pinch of inflation at the grocery store, take an extra look back at your budget and make sure that, hey, that $100 for groceries is still the same $100 that you're spending, and altering for an income change if you get a promotion and putting more money towards savings. So I think that's super important.
Yeah, I really like the point you brought up about inflation because I know my groceries now do not cost what they used to cost.
Yeah. No, it's definitely those and the new expenses that start coming in because people will make a budget, they forget to add the new expense, and then they go back and they're like, I just don't know what's happening. I'm $200 short every month, and they forget that they added in a new, maybe not a gym membership, that's kind of expensive for $200, but added in some sort of new item that costs extra each month, and they just feel like they're short. We'll call it $50 a month, and they just forgot that they added that new gym membership, or the gym membership cost went up. And I think that's also important, is keeping an eye on your subscriptions, because a lot of people will plug those into the budget and not realize that they sent out an email that got buried in your 18,000 unread emails that you're keeping track of on your app and seeing who can get the highest. And buried in that email was, oh, your subscription just went up from $15 to $18, which seems like only a little bit, but if a couple subscriptions do that over time and you didn't tweak your budget, that's adding up as well.
All right. Well, thank you guys so much for watching another episode of Financial Tides. We really look forward to helping anyone that's interested in budgeting or, all of our other topics that we like to discuss. If there's anyone in your life that you think could benefit from this podcast, feel free to share, and we will see you guys next time.
Thanks so much for tuning into Financial Tides. Have a good one.
John Perillo, Taylor Perillo, and Amanda Endersby are financial advisors offering securities through Cetera Advisors LLC, a registered broker-dealer doing insurance business in California as CFGA Insurance Agency LLC, member of FINRA/SIPC, advisory services offered through Cetera Investment Advisors LLC. A registered investment advisor, Cetera firms are under separate ownership from any other named entity. California Insurance Licenses number 0F60123 and 0M90666, 6265 Greenwich Drive, Suite 251, San Diego, California 92122. The views depicted in this material are for information purposes only and are not necessarily those of Cetera Advisors LLC. They should not be considered specific advice or recommendations for any individual. Neither Cetera Advisors LLC nor any of its representatives may give legal or tax advice.